We're excited for our next speaker. Coach Dan Casey is the head coach and OC at St. David's School in Raleigh, North Carolina. His topic for this discussion session is counter option in a modern spread offense. Coach, thank you so much for taking the time away from your busy schedule to be here with us today, and we really appreciate it.
Coach Rice, I appreciate you. Thank you for reaching out and connecting with me. It's always, one of the coolest things about kind of the virtual revolution in football coaching is getting to connect with so many guys and connect across states. And the fact that I'm over here in Raleigh at 9 p.m. getting to talk to you after I got my kids down is pretty awesome. So I'm always up to talk some football, and definitely appreciate you guys being on. And if you're joining via recording, appreciate that too. And yeah, hoping we can just we can learn and grow together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed through the first part of this presentation. The presentation is, I ended up writing a book about counter. So I want to give you some of the basics, but then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about counter option in particular, and give you guys a couple of wrinkles that I think will be helpful to introduce into your spread offense if you're running, 10 personnel, 11 personnel, even some, 20 personnel stuff. I think it can benefit you. So I'm going to start off with my presentation here. I'm going to work through this pretty quickly to give you some of the basics, and then we'll get on to some of the counter option stuff. I'll try and draw it up best I can here. So we'll get started. All right. So like Coach Rice was saying, I'm going to be talking about counter option in the modern spread offense. I think to understand counter option, I really want to give you more of a perspective on the counter play in general. For those of you guys that may be following me on Instagram or Twitter, you maybe saw that I wrote a book a couple months back called The Ultimate Guide to Counter. Counter is one of those plays that I've fallen in love with as a coach. It really became a play we hung our hat on as a team in my time as an offensive coordinator and a head coach. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of my backstory for those of you guys who maybe follow me but don't know me super well. So my background is that I was a high school quarterback. So I've been playing football since I was 8 years old, played everything from offensive line to quarterback, been a part of all these different teams and all these different places. To take you a step back even further, when I was in high school, I spent 2 years in Indianapolis, Indiana, freshman and sophomore year. Then I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I'm currently at. But my senior year, I was actually in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Rock Hill is known as kind of a cradle of great football players. I'm not one of those, but Stephon Gilmore, Jadeveon Clowney, some of these guys, Mason Rudolph, guys playing in the league, some really talented players have come out of Rock Hill. So had a great experience my senior year down there, played quarterback. But then when I went to college, transitioned to Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina, which is just north of Charlotte. When I got on campus, I realized pretty quickly, like there was no chance I was going to be a quarterback. We ran kind of the wing tee when I was in high school. And, I didn't have an appreciation for offensive strategy, really. I just wanted to get in the shotgun and run around back there and throw it up. And so when I got to college, I realized, like, from a skill set perspective and just the natural gifts and tools, I didn't have it. But I was a decent athlete, which is, I think, why some kids end up playing quarterback at the high school level, is because they're decent athletes. And so I knew that I was going to have to transition when I got to college. And I kind of found this natural transition to safety. Started off at free safety, moved to strong safety, played some, basically we called it the star linebacker position, kind of that overhang in a 4-2-5, kind of the strong side linebacker in the 4-2-5. And even by the time I was done in my college career, I ended up even playing down in the box and walking down as a jackbacker in, sub packages and different things like that, rushing off the edge. So I feel like I kind of got to experience every level of defense, whether it's kind of the back end stuff, getting in the box, even understanding some defensive line play. So one of the things that I found out as a player in college was that there were certain things the offense could do that made life miserable for us on defense. And so, one of the teams in our conference when I was at Davidson College was a team, Jacksonville University. We played in the Pioneer Football League, which is kind of the craziest league in America, to be honest. It's, it ranges from University of San Diego, Marist up in New York, Jacksonville and Stetson down in Florida, Drake up in Iowa. So it's just this wacky conference. So you saw all types of different styles of football. And there's a team, Jacksonville University at the time, coached by Kerwin Bell, who actually just accepted the head coaching job at Western Carolina. But they basically ran the tempo, no huddle, spread offense that they were snapping the ball every 10 seconds. Very reminiscent of what the Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich teams were doing at Oregon, some of what Marshall was doing and Chad Morris at Clemson. Like everybody in like the early 2010s was kind of playing with this breakneck tempo pace. So I realized that was going to be a problem for me on defense because no matter how good a shape you're in, nothing can quite prepare you for that. So I knew when I transitioned from playing in college to eventually coaching that if I ever got a chance to be on the offensive side of the ball, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do to make life miserable for defensive players out there. So I ended up graduating from Davidson College, and my goal was to continue playing. I had a passion for the game. I had a decent run at Davidson, even though the team, we didn't have much team success. I felt like I played pretty well as a player, and wanted to give a shot at the next level. I think every athlete has a little bit of an inflated sense of what might be possible. So I ended up working out for a couple teams in Canada, never made it. Really wasn't talented enough to keep playing. And I really was at this crossroads where I had to realize, playing was over. And football is one of those games that you can't go to the YMCA and get a pickup game in. So I realized that I was going to need to do something different. And getting into coaching was kind of the next logical step. And so what I did is I was actually in graduate school at the time, and I sent out an email to every high school in the area and said, "Hey, I'll volunteer. I'll come hang out. I'll do anything you need," and didn't get a single response, which I'm sure a lot of young coaches probably have a similar experience with that. And so what ended up happening is, didn't get any responses, sat a year out, didn't get to coach, didn't get to play. Really rough year for me. The following year, I ended up getting notified by a school in Raleigh, North Carolina, not far from where I was at in Durham. And they had a spot on the staff for me. So I came over, helped out with the DBs a little bit, just trying to get to know the kids, trying to do everything I could from helping out with the off-season conditioning program and doing some college recruiting stuff, just helping out any way I could. And, in the meantime, there was a shuffling with the staff, and I had an opportunity to interview for the head coaching job. So I'm 24 years old, interviewed for it, fortunate enough to be given that role. And so I transitioned from being a college DB, a DB coach for a year. All of a sudden I'm head coach, OC, running the show, coaching the quarterbacks. So I had a lot to figure out in a short amount of time. And so if you're following my timeline, that might be about the time I popped up on Twitter and started just tweeting out videos like every day. And so this is when I was really just trying to learn the game. And at the time I was, one of the few, if not the only football coach on campus. So it's not like I could go down to my buddy's office and we could, sit there and draw stuff up and talk about stuff. I had to go outside of the school to find some resources, which was challenging, especially for a 24-year-old coach that didn't have many connections in the area. And so again, I'm just drinking from a fire hose, trying to learn everything I can. And that first year, our offense was just a hodgepodge of just insanity. I mean, imagine just like me scrolling through a Twitter feed and just like selecting a play. Like that's almost how I called it the first year. It was a total mess. And so in that off season, after my first year as an OC, I realized that I was going to have to go back to the drawing board and really develop a philosophy of how I wanted to play football. We always played with tempo. We were always a no huddle. But in order to be successful, I knew I would have to develop a philosophy. And so we basically developed a philosophy based on this idea of the speed advantage. And so we were asking every game we played whether or not we felt like we had the speed advantage as a team. And what I mean by that is it's as simple as this. Are we faster at XYZ position than the other team? And so we would go through in our game planning and say, we have a pretty fast kid at running back. We feel like he's quicker than their linebackers. And so we developed this philosophy where we basically said, if we feel like we do have the speed advantage at a majority of positions, we want to get vertical in the pass game and horizontal in the run game. I've talked about this a lot at different clinics, different places. And it's not necessarily, don't pay any particular mind to the play itself as much as the philosophy. Like if we can threaten people vertically, let's do it. If we can make their defensive line and linebackers run sideline to sideline, let's do it. Like chances are eventually they're going to crack. And this is air raid philosophy. This is triple option philosophy. Whether you talk to Barry Switzer or Mike Leach, they're going to talk about the same things, right? You want to throw it short, make them run sideline to sideline, wear those guys out early in the game, get it on the edge. And then when they are, when they're tired and when they're sucked up, then that they're taking deep shots and trying to stretch the field vertically. So very simple stuff. And then we also asked the question, well, what if we don't have the speed advantage, which would happen from time to time? Then we realized that we wanted to get vertical in the run game, and we wanted to actually stretch the field more horizontally in the pass game. So think to yourself, mesh, think to yourself, Y cross, think to yourself, and again, these can be vertical stretches as well, but some of the Lavelle Edwards BYU stuff of stretching the field, oblique stretches, different things like that. And then vertical in the run game was we wanted to get downhill, quick hitters, traps, power, counter, getting downhill in the run game. And so we were constantly gauging from a play calling perspective, whether we felt like we had the speed advantage or whether we felt like we're going to have to give guys opportunities to create space in some other ways. So year two, we took a big leap forward. I certainly took a big leap forward as a coach, just in my understanding of the game. Obviously, it always helps to have really talented players, and we certainly did that second year. Ended up having an undefeated regular season, averaged a bunch of points, had a kid who was about 120 pounds, who was the state player of the year, a running back for us. Nobody could touch the kid. I mean, I think there was one game he scored maybe 8 touchdowns. So we just had a really great run, ended up going to a state championship game. And in that game, we were held to 20. So again, you think about like a 40-point swing and what you're averaging. Now, I know that can get skewed by some blowouts and stuff like that, but we were playing with tempo. We were putting up points. And then all of a sudden we were just knocked out in the state championship game. It's the first real close game we've been in all year. And I realized at that point, we were predominantly, from an offensive philosophy standpoint, a wide zone boot team. So we were running stretch, we were running outside zone, we were running wide zone, and then we were running boot off of that, play action, and taking vertical shots. That was kind of our bread and butter. But then we also started to sprinkle in the counter game a little bit with some different runners. And counter was a play that was really good to us because obviously if you're running a lot of outside zone and the defense is having to almost overplay it or overcommit to it, you have an opportunity, especially if you're running stuff to the field and then coming back to the boundary. That was something we did a lot of. We would get in unbalanced sets, formation and line unbalanced sets, and we would run a lot of counter back. And so we had a team that did a really nice job with outside zone and did a really nice job with counter on us and really held back our run game to the point where I was calling a lot of drop back passing play calls, which really wasn't what we did best. We were a play action team. And so I realized that, honestly, that with the talent we had, I thought we should have won the state championship. And I felt like I stole a ring off my kids' fingers because I didn't have any answers for the way that they were playing counter against us. And so this really sent me on just really a deep dive, to be honest with you. I was like, I don't want this to happen again. I don't want to be in a situation again where people can totally take us out of our game plan by stopping one play or a couple plays that we do really well. I want to have answers. And so that was really a quest for me. And that was part of the reason I ended up writing the book to begin with. So some of you guys may be familiar with the movie Sully, which is, I think, stars Tom Hanks. It's about Chelsea Sullenberger, the guy who actually landed the plane on the Hudson River after, I guess they ran into a flock of birds. And I was actually watching this movie and reviewing some of the story. And the more I thought of it, the more I was like, man, that sounds like a football coach a little bit. So the reason I think that Sully was able to save so many lives is because he was so well prepared for this specific event. Like nobody was more qualified to be in this crisis than Chelsea Sullenberger. He co-authored a paper with NASA on error-inducing contexts in aviation. He was an air accident instructor. So if something would happen in an accident, he would actually try and develop procedures that would help for evacuations of aircrafts, et cetera. And also in his spare time, he just spent time studying the psychology behind how to keep the crew under control and really functioning during a crisis. So this dude is like the perfect person in terms of the background he had to be in this situation, which is part of the reason it was, I guess you could consider it a success in terms of saving lives. And so it really got me thinking, like, and this was kind of something our staff talked about a lot, was like, don't wait for a crisis. Obviously, like we were able to roll through the regular season and then we get to the state championship game and we just didn't have an answer. And we decided that instead of looking back on that game and saying, man, I wish we would have done this or wish we would have done that, let's have a mental models in our mind that we're able to come up with answers in real time. Let's be familiar enough with the different ways that the defense is fitting counter and fitting outside zone that we have answers. So many of you guys may have read the book Outliers by Anders Ericsson, or excuse me, by Malcolm Gladwell. And he actually used a lot of this guy, Anders Ericsson's research to develop the 10,000 hours theory, which is essentially if you spend 10,000 hours studying something, you're going to be an expert, you're going to be a master. And what Malcolm Gladwell got slightly off about Anders Ericsson research is it's not just the time spent, it's the way you spend that time. And so Ericsson was basically saying that the main point of the time that you spend studying is that you are undergoing what he calls deliberate practice, which is developing mental representations of the situation or scenario that you're trying to perfect. So for example, if I were to tell you, all right, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to envision a 4-down alignment quarters look with 2 high safeties, you'd be able to close your eyes and you'd be able to envision that against a trip set. All right, now do it against 2x2. All right, now do it against 21 personnel. You're able to envision all of these things because you're a football coach. You've been studying this stuff quite a bit. So basically what we were trying to do as a staff is, all right, how do we have a library of mental models, mental representations that we can say, all right, they're fitting counter like this, and this is what we do in response. This will keep counter moving instead of what I used to do in the past was if they did a nice job fitting counter or power early in the game, I'd just get away from it as a play caller. And I realized I didn't need to do that. There was always an answer to fix the problem I was facing. Had a coach in college who used to tell me, if you have a plan, you have a chance. And so that's what we try to develop, a plan. And so basically what we would do is and this is, I'm going to start getting into talking about counter option a little bit, but I'm going to lay the foundation a little bit more. So we basically did this. We cut the line in half down the center. And we basically said this is probably true for just about any play, but the counter play in particular, every time we called counter, we wanted clarity around what the backside protection would be and what the play side plan would be. So for example, this is a little draw up of how you would see it. You would see the play side plan being trap, and I'll explain that more in a second. And the backside protection would be the running back cap cutoff. So we would cap the C gap with the running back. He would cut it off and we'd run quarterback counter back to the field. So obviously there's several ways that the defense can beat counter. One is backside pursuit. So you want to make sure you have a backside protection. But the real main way that they can defeat counter is the way they fit it play side. And there's a variety of ways to do it. They can force it, they can spill it, they can do a combination of the two. They can, on the backside, they can scrape exchange. There's so many different ways for the defense to attack your counterplay. And we wanted to make sure we had answers built in. So one of the biggest keys, I think, in calling counter, especially at the high school level, is having clarity around who is making a read on the play. So for example, when we call, say we run, let's make it as simple as possible, 10 personnel GT counter. All right, the quarterback's taking the snap. We're at the mesh point, and we're basically asking the quarterback to protect the backside of counter with his eyes. We always say that, if all things are equal and there's nobody to cap the backside, you are reading the backside C gap defender or whomever is responsible, B to C really, but we're expecting that edge to come from the C gap. You're reading that, and if he pursues down the line, just like zone read, we're pulling the football and we're protecting the play with our eyes, with our feet, obviously, if we pull the football. What I end up seeing happen a lot for a lot of teams when they call, for example, GT counter, is they're asking maybe the quarterback to make a read. They're also asking that play side guard or the pulling guard to make a read, and then they're asking the pulling tackle to make a read. So you're essentially, if you're in 10 personnel, you're running GT counter against a 4-down look, you are asking 3 different people to make a read. So you're asking the quarterback to read the backside. You're asking the pulling guard to read the front side C gap defender or edge defender. All right, if he spills, I'm going to log him, and then the tackle is going to run over the top. So you're asking the guard to make a read and the tackle to make a read. Now, you may have guys that can do that. That's great. If you do, roll with it. But a lot of us don't necessarily have dudes that can seamlessly read that and make the correct decision. So you're basically asking 3 different players on one play to make the right decision. And then the running back obviously has to make the read and fit it up in there, but that's his job. So we're gonna stick with 3 guys making the read. I am a proponent, after studying this thing, that especially at the high school level, especially with younger offensive linemen, counter is the perfect play for them if you give them clarity. So you need to take the read out of it as much as possible. So I think the way to do that is to differentiate between counter trap and counter sweep. Now, this comes directly from Nebraska, and I'm going to get into that for a second, but let's just so we have a visual. This is 10 personnel, GT counter, 4-down look. So we're going to work the double on the 3 technique, climb up to the will linebacker. We're going to block back on the shade. We're going to pull the guard to kick out the jack linebacker if he's boxing that thing in. We're going to kick him out, and then the tackle is going to wrap through, ISO on the mic. The only person that can make the tackle is an overhang Sam defender, so nickel Sam, or a safety rolling down into the box. So we feel good about that, right? If we're in 10 personnel and we can get our running back one-on-one with a support player or a safety, that's a decent play for us, right? That's a 5-yard gain. We feel pretty good about it. Maybe more if he can break it. On the backside, the quarterback is reading the C-gap defender. So he's blocking him with his eyes. If that guy, runs down the line, we're pulling the football and we're out the gate. So just again, to give you a mental representation of what I'm talking about. So let's talk a little bit about trap versus sweep. So, when I went back and looked at some of the history of the counterplay, one of the things that I really dug into was, all right, like who started this thing? And obviously, it's really tough to track football history because there's not like a written tradition. It's kind of an oral tradition. It gets passed down. Like one guy will tell you, I got this from there and I stole this from him. And so I did a lot of digging, and I don't know if I went far enough back, but obviously the team that's probably most well known for the counter play, GT counter or counter tray, as they called it, was the Washington Redskins, right? So they had their gut play, which was kind of a dive, and then they would have the counter play off of it, which is counter tray. And pretty much all the Redskins coaches admitted that they were watching Nebraska tape from the 70s, and they just ripped the play straight from Nebraska. They said nobody was running it better than Nebraska. So I always love going back to, like, when I'm looking at run game stuff, one of the foundational teams in football history, really, in terms of what they were doing in a run game perspective, is Nebraska. I think one of the most comprehensive run teams in all of football. Don't just think of them as a option team. Obviously, they ran I option. They did all this stuff. But they had such a diverse run game. It's incredible. Whether it's zone, gap schemes, man schemes, ISOs, it's beautiful. It's great stuff. So these definitions are straight from the horse's mouth, straight from Milt Tenopir, the offensive line coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers during Coach Osborne's campaign, which spread out over probably 30-some years, maybe 40. So GT counter trap. Now, again, I'm all about clarity. I want to see a clear picture of how we're going to get things done when we're running counter. So if we call counter trap, the goal is to kick out that edge defender against, the only thing that would keep us from kicking him out is him going crazy wrong arm and just diving underneath that block to spill it. So we pull to hug the line of scrimmage. We try to kick out, get the inside shoulder. And again, we're only going to log that C or D gap defender if he turns his shoulders and wrong arms. So we are getting a trap block unless all else fails. And then the rule for the tackle is, similar. We're pulling to hug the line of scrimmage straight down the line. We're wrapping inside the guard, ISO blocking on the play side linebacker, and we're only going to bounce off that wrap track if the guard gets spilled aggressively, right? We want to make the defense sacrifice a man if they're going to spill. Like that has to be the attitude. There's too many guys, I think, that are pulling on counter and they're slow pulling, and then the spill gets a 2-for-1 and it just creates a mess on counter. And I've seen it so many times. It's so frustrating for me as a coach when I'm like, where's the clarity? Where's the game plan in terms of how we're going to get down the line quickly if we're really trying to kick out? So, and again, I realize, like, once you get to the college and professional level, the ability of some of these guys and the athleticism of some of these guys will allow you to do more slow play read stuff. And you watch Oklahoma do it, it looks amazing. But I think if we're honest with ourselves about our personnel and what we got at the high school level, clarity is key. So let's look at Nebraska's counter trap. So this is a QB GT counter out of 10 personnel. We're going to get the running back capping the backside C gap. And we're going to get, the play itself, I'm not as concerned about as much as I want you to look at the path of the guard and tackle, how they pull straight down the line of scrimmage, kick out, wrap ISO. And the tackle doesn't even block anybody because I think this is 96. I think Colorado just stunts out of the play. So it'll give you an idea of what's going on. Straight down the line, kick out, wrap an ISO. And you see, like, the quarterback put his foot in the ground and got downhill on this play. Scott Frost, pretty quick kid when he was playing. That tackle he's out in front. Like, there's not a situation where, we're putting a hand on his back and kind of picking our way through it. Like, there's some intention behind this play. So again, just to give you the draw up here, capping the backside C gap, again, working the double to the backside linebacker, kicking out the backside end, and then we're wrapping up and ISOing on the play side linebacker. Again, I think it's really important to get this backside cut off, because if not, he's going to be able to track it down and make the play from behind. So another way to run it, obviously, is just hand the ball off to the running back, quarterback. He protects it with his eyes on that backside end, and he pulls the football if we crash. Okay. So again, backside protection is the cap cutoff. Play side plan is a trap plan. So the guard is kicking and the tackle's wrapping. We're doing that unless that jack linebacker or that defensive end just dives in there and spills that thing. Okay. Next, we have the GT counter sweep rules. And now this is really, really, really important if we're going to talk about counter option, because there's a clear differentiation. When you call counter option, it is a GT counter sweep play, or not a GT counter, excuse me. It's a counter sweep play. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the guard is pulling and he's actually gaining depth. So 1 to 2 yards of depth behind the line of scrimmage. And the goal is to log that DN. So we need a little bit of depth if we're going to attack and try and capture the outside shoulder of the defensive end. The only way you end up kicking out that edge defender is if he runs up the field aggressively. Okay. Same thing with the tackle. If we're going to run GT counter sweep, again, differentiating between trap and sweep, we're going to pull to gain 3 yards of depth behind the line of scrimmage. And we are running over the top, full speed, running over the top to block the secondary support defender. And the only time we'd come under the block of the guard is if penetration from that edge defender is so deep that it's in our face at 3 yards, then we go ahead and turn it up, right? Because he's taken himself out of the play. I think the biggest point in all of this is the only way that you get off your track is if the defense decides that they want to take themselves out of the play. If they want to take themselves out of the play, let them do it. And they're going to have to do it, pretty aggressively. If they want to spill and take themselves out of the play, just ride them down. If they want to stay way outside and take themselves out of the play, just ride them out. Okay. But we don't want to get in a situation where we're having to read where we're not running full speed. And this really goes back to North Dakota State. Okay. Talked to Tyler Roll, their offensive coordinator. One of the things he hammers home with them is sprint to hit. Full speed when they run A-gap power. Everybody knows A-gap power is coming. Everybody knows that fullback is going to kick out the D end. Everybody knows that guard is going to take a step back and he's going to attack aggressively. People could spill that, right? But in order to spill, you have to come with the same level of intensity, the same level of speed if we're sprinting to hit. Okay, so I take that same philosophy when it comes to counter. Sprint to hit. Okay, so this is the Nebraska counter sweep. Don't necessarily pay as much attention to, the 21 personnel or the fake reverse or anything like that. What I really want you to pay attention to is the depth of the guard and the depth of the tackle. Like this, there's a clear difference between what they just pulled on counter trap and what they're about to pull on counter sweep. So let's let it roll. Again, depth of the guard, depth of the tackle. Watch him get to 3 yards and run over the top to that secondary support defender. Now, again, they dress this thing out, but this is a great look at it, right? Depth, 1 to 2, 3. And he's running full speed. If you've got kids that can run on your offensive line, you got to have GT counter sweep in. I love the play so much. It ends up hitting a lot like buck sweep. Some of you wing T guys might know that. But it's such a great play and it really can get you on the edge. And it can really take advantage of teams that are trying to spill everything, like the spill it and kill it teams. Run counter sweep. Take advantage of that. I think it's really good. And so again, let's talk about backside protection, play side plan, right? Gotta protect the backside if we're going to run this. I don't know if many of you guys run in 21 personnel, I formation stuff, but again, fullback's going to cut off the backside end. We're going to fake reverse to hold some of the linebacker flow. We can certainly do that. And then get a 3-man surface to the field. So we're just washing down and the guard and tackle are running over the top to the secondary support players. So counter sweep, guard log, tackle run over the top. Okay. Pretty standard stuff. But the biggest thing is that coaching point of the depth. If you don't get the depth right, the play doesn't work the same way. It also affects the running back's footwork or the quarterback's footwork. So they are distinctive plays, even though they, on the surface, they may look pretty similar. So in the book itself, I broke counter down into 14 modules. Like when I was studying it, I saw like these variations were what really stood out to me, that there were so many different ways to run it. And there are certainly ways that it, and I really think it fits into any offense. Like I've seen flexbone teams run it. I've seen pro style teams run it. I've seen air raid teams run it. Like anyone can run counter. It's such a great play. But basically it kind of depends how much you want to spend. We always talk about like how cheap of an install is this? How expensive of an install is this? And so I kind of ranked them from beginner to advanced. And I think there's some really cheap installs that you can get rolling with, and then maybe some more expensive ones that might cost you a little bit more. But there's so many different ways to run it. I've challenged a couple of my buddies that have read through the book. I was like, do you believe me now that you can go a whole game calling just variations of counter? And a couple of them might give it a try in the fall. We'll see. We'll report back. We will see if it happens or not. All right, so now let's get into counter option. I want to talk about two sections, okay? So I want to talk about optioning the backside. So this is part of our backside protection. And I want to talk about optioning the front side, okay? Because these are fun plays for me. So when we option the backside, it's going to be the quarterback basically reading the backside of GT counter. When we're optioning the front side, that's true counter option. We're talking like Paul Johnson stuff, okay? So let's look at counter option, GT counter option, and the option is the backside protection. Now there's a variety of ways to do this. I'm just going to give you one example. So we've got Eastern Washington, I believe, 2016 or 17. They're playing Northern Colorado. We've got a 4-down look, 2 high safeties, trips right. So what we're going to do is we're going to run GT counter into the boundary, and we're going to run a bubble to the field. So the bubble, that number 3 is the pitch man. Okay. So it's an extended triple option. We're actually going to throw the ball out. Some teams will pitch it with that maybe they'll run orbit over the top and pitch it. We're going to run extended triple option here. So what we're doing is the quarterback is reading the field side edge defender. If that edge defender crashes, we're pulling the football. The pitch man is the overhang defender. If that overhang defender is going to work out to the bubble, the quarterback just can keep the football, right? If that overhang defender is going to step up to the quarterback, we're going to throw the ball on the edge. We've got 2 for 2 blocking plus the receiver. So the only player left to fill that alley is the safety. And if they decide to rotate their safeties against counter and roll the weak safety down into the box, that means they're going to rotate that field safety to the middle of the field, and he's going to have a long way to run to support that bubble. So let's see how it plays out. So quarterback's reading the edge defender. He's pulling the football. Again, that overhang steps up. We're getting the ball out on the edge, and we are in business, right? So it's good to look at it from the end zone copy here. Again, that quarterback, you can see the read, right? A lot of times defenses will run a scrape exchange where they will crash that D end and they'll step up a linebacker or an overhang defender to go ahead and make the play on the quarterback. The only way to really mitigate that is to run some sort of read or option. Okay. So if that overhang wants to work the scrape exchange, we're going to be able to get the football out on the edge. Okay. The great thing about this play is, I'm going to go back here and see if we can pause it. Okay. So if we're going to run GT counter into the boundary, okay, we've got really good numbers here. We're going to kick out the DN because we're running GT counter trap. Again, flat down the line, kick out the edge defender, ISO on the weak side linebacker. Okay. That means that the running back is one-on-one with the boundary safety. So if they want to keep a safety at depth, go ahead, we'll run counter into the boundary all day. If they want to rotate a safety down like they do, great. That means they're going to have to commit numbers, or that means they've committed numbers to the boundary and aren't able to commit numbers to the field. So again, we're always playing that game with people, especially in these 2 high looks, quarters looks, or rotating, any type of safety rotation into single high. Okay. So again, love it because we're playing option football with counter. It's great. Okay. So that, this is GT counter option. The backside protection, once again, is an extended triple option. So the quarterback's reading the C gap, extended triple option to the bubble screen. And what we've got here is the dive player, quote unquote dive player, since we're playing option football, is that jack linebacker or that edge defender, that defensive end. So if he's going to sit and play, then we're going to go ahead and hand the football off. Now, obviously, if they decide that they're going to rotate a safety down into the box, that could provide some issues for us. But one of the things that we'll do is we'll push crack with the boundary receiver and try and put our running back one-on-one with a corner. Love putting running backs in one-on-one situations with cornerbacks if we can. So that's another option for us, right? If we want to crack the boundary safety, if they're going to just sit on the front side and not let us get to our option game. But if they're really going to attack counter and try and chase it down from the backside, having these options in place is really going to help us. Okay. So just something to think about. Again, the play side plan on counter, as always, we got to have it. Guard kicking, tackle wrapping, we're running trap, counter trap. Okay. So real quick, I just want to go through a couple like problem solving exercises with you. And then I want to get to some of the real counter option stuff, and we'll actually draw some stuff up. I don't want to shoot it over on my time, but I think I got about 10 minutes left. So play side problem solving. So one of the things that has been really popular for, and this is particularly like teams like Iowa State, right, that are running maybe 3 safety looks and really looking to spill the football. What they'll do is they'll spill, and fill with that backside safety. Okay, so here's a great example. This is Army against Oklahoma back when they almost beat Oklahoma. Jay Bateman's the defensive coordinator. What they're going to do is they're going to spill the first puller with the edge defender, spill the second puller with the play side linebacker, and the safety is going to fit it for no gain. Really, really nice fit by the defense, right? So we're going to squeeze, spill, fill. Okay, great plan defensively. Okay, I love it. Even a team that's overmatched like Army is able to get a stop here on counter because they're spilling it. You can see the way the H-back has to divert, and they're able to fill with the safety. Okay. Now, let's problem solve for a second because we're on offense and there's always an answer, right? So part of what we'll do is if they're going to commit to this strategy, let's just look at the receiver down on the numbers here, right? If we're able to win that leverage battle and that safety decides that he's going to fit up on counter, and we decide to pull this football out and throw a glance, I'm thinking that hash looks pretty appetizing for me as a coach or as a receiver, as a quarterback, right? So again, if there's a strategy from the defense that they're going to spill, fill, then we're going to commit to being able to throw that boundary glance route, that 6-step post or quick post, bang 8, some people call it. We've been calling it a glance. It opens up space for that. Okay. So there's always problems that will present themselves and ways to solve them. So again, this is an option football, but it's RPO football, right? Run pass option, where if we're going to read that boundary safety, right? 3rd level read RPO. If he's going to commit to filling, we're going to basically replace him with the receiver and throw that ball in there. The other way you could do it is to push crack, right? We can push crack with that receiver and basically put our running back one-on-one with a corner. Not a bad fit, right? So you got to basically ask yourself, do you like the matchup on the corner? Do you like the matchup having your receiver one-on-one with the corner or your running back one-on-one with the corner? That's the question every coach has to ask. And depending how you decide to problem solve, you can get your one-on-one, and that's a good fit. That's a good deal for the offense. Okay. Sorry, I may be having questions coming through. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely going to get to those at the end. Okay. Here we're actually going to run the RPO. Okay. So one of the things that a lot of coaches have asked me in the past is, all right, coach, like if we're running RPOs, like what variation of counter do you like? GH counter all the way, because it maintains a lot of the protection on the backside. In particular, you're able to hinge that backside tackle, keep the protection in place. And then the H-back's an eligible receiver. So if he goes downfield, there's not an issue. Okay. So North Carolina, 2016, I believe, running same side GH counter. And they're going to read that boundary safety. So let's look at him, right? He's creeping up. He wants to get involved in the run game. We're pulling that guard. He's going to spill it. We're going to run the H-back. He's going to spill it, but that safety stepped up and left a void on the hash. And we feel good about that matchup because that's one of our dudes there at receiver into the boundary. Again, the glance to replace. Again, I'm sorry if this film's a little choppy. A lot of times when we roll through it on Zoom, it's not as good as I want it to be. But again, you're seeing the principles, right? That if that safety wants to get involved, we find our one-on-one, right? Again, we're trying to play easy games if we can. Again, same side. And again, we're thinking sweep because one of the nice things about sweep is we've asked, again, this is kind of going back to the Milt Tenopir stuff. He asked that second puller to have 3 yards of depth on his pull. Where's your H-back at? He's about 2-3 yards of depth, right? So he's in the perfect position to run GT counter sweep or GH counter sweep, excuse me. So he's already kind of in position to be able to do it. So again, it's just drawing of the play, backside protection. We got the field bubble to kind of hold. So again, if we get like hot, right? Hot would be that Sam coming hot off the edge. Then we want to be able to throw that bubble out there, right? We don't want to get people unaccounted for running to the quarterback on RPO stuff. So again, we have our hot reads that we can pull out. We can pull out of the play if we need it. We can alert to it. Then we also have the tackle hinging B to C gap. So we're going to protect inside hand and then really hinge to the backside C gap. and be able to provide enough protection on that RPO. The ball's still got to come out quick, but we're not leaving the quarterback with a real short edge. If we pull GT on RPO, I've seen some teams do it. Maybe they'll hang an H-back back there. You better be pretty confident in that dude one-on-one with a D-end because I've seen some guys get laid out on GT counter RPO. So I like GH counter RPO a whole lot. Play side plan is the sweep. So we're running the guard log in, the H-back running over the top. And then in addition, the play side plan, because we want to control that boundary safety, is we want to run the boundary RPO glance. So we're going to read that safety, third level RPO read. And if he wants to creep into the box and be involved in the run fit, we're going to make him pay by replacing him down the hash. Again, another way we can do it, crack push with the receiver, right? Again, it's the play side plan is important because there's only so many people that can get involved in the fit. And again, I've drawn a lot of these up against 4-down looks, but the principles hold true for some of the 3-down looks you'll get as well. Who is going to be the bonus player that you can't block? That's the question you got to ask yourself a lot. Okay, so we're now going to get a sample of counter option from module 11. Okay, this is a spread option team. It's actually my alma mater, Davidson College. Coach Abel is there, and he does a fantastic job. They won the league this year running spread option. But counter option, you really only see like true option teams run it. And I think it's a shame because honestly, all the principles of your GH counter or GT counter hold true in counter option. But teams just don't run it. Basically, the only difference is instead of having a second puller, your quarterback is pitching off the second man you would block on counter. Like that's as simple as it is. And so there are really cool ways that you can get to counter option where you can get other people involved in the run game. And as long as your quarterback is serviceable enough to run it a couple times a game, I think running counter option can be a great addition, an unexpected addition in your modern spread offense. So let's take a look real quick at Davidson. Now, again, they got a bear front here. I think it's a bear front. It's kind of hard to tell in this film. But they're going to run their counter option, and counter option is a counter sweep. Like at the core, it's a counter sweep. So that guard is pulling to log the defensive end. Okay. And then what they've got is they've got kind of a wing or H-back who's going to arc up, and he's going to bypass the secondary support defender, so the kind of the play side linebacker. And then he's going to move up to the alley player, and the quarterback is going to pitch off the play side linebacker. Okay. So again, a lot of times option teams will get these junk looks on defense, but the principles will definitely hold true against more standard spread offenses against more standard spread defenses. Okay. Let's see if we can get this to play. I may have to draw some stuff up because my video is a little lackluster here at the end. I'll draw up some of this counter option stuff. Okay. But this will give you an idea of what's happening here. So again, they're getting kind of like a bear front. It's interesting. A lot of teams that play triple option will play like double 2 eyes. So double A gap. Basically what we're doing is the outside edge player, so the 5 technique or whoever's playing in that C gap, he is the person we're logging. So everybody's blocking down. They're basically, it looks like a dive look here. And what they're going to do is that running back's going to replace, quarterback's going to flip his hips. So the guard is going to log the defensive end. We're going to pitch off the Sam linebacker. And that H-back is going to cruise on up to the alley player, the strong safety. And we're going to pitch off the Sam linebacker. If that Sam linebacker wants to run over the top and take the pitch, the quarterback's going to keep it, and he's got H protection. And if not, the quarterback's going to pitch it out on the edge off the Sam linebacker. And we've got a good little play out on the edge. Okay. So I wanted to, I guess, real quick, I'll finish out the presentation part before we get on the board a little bit by saying, I wrote this book back in January, and I've been just really fortunate. So many coaches have been so kind in their reviews, and I think it's really helped some guys. And I think guys are going to be able to run counter effectively, no matter what offensive system they run. So that's about all the pitching I'll do. I think it's a great resource. I had a ton of fun making it. I plan to do a lot more stuff like it, and hopefully keep getting stuff to you. So I'm gonna stop my share here. See if I can find my mouse. Okay. And then Coach, did you want to open it up for questions before I got on the board, or do you want me to jump on there real quick?
Just there's a few questions in there, and if you're okay with that, we might be able to answer those, and then
yeah. Absolutely. Let me pull them up. Okay. Okay. This is a great question from Coach Kevin. So the backfield action, does it change on counter trap versus counter sweep? Absolutely. So the thing that you really have to stress with your running backs in particular is that the play is, you got to think of it as the difference between inside zone and outside zone. So the track that you're taking on outside zone is wider and slower is not quite the right word, but more deliberate. As in inside zone, we're really attacking downhill. So when we run GT counter trap, for example, my running backs are attacking. My quarterbacks are attacking. If we're running GT counter sweep, we're really looking to pick and bounce that thing. But I think the key is to let that play. You have to let the sweep play develop, because you have to work the log, and then you have to have that tackle running over the top. The biggest mistake I've seen people make, and this is from watching a lot of Oklahoma film, because they run, even though they may not call it, because I'm sure those guys read a lot because they're really talented offensive linemen, but the biggest thing I've seen them run into trouble with is if they're getting spilled, a lot of times the reason that the plays are tackled for loss maybe are because the running backs are outrunning stuff. So don't outrun it. Stay with your tackle. Trust your tackle. And especially if you're calling it, that guy's going to have a full head of steam. And a lot of times he's going to get a secondary kick out. So a lot of times what I've seen is an initial spill, and then the support player is actually going to force the ball. So you're going to get, and I swear to you, Oklahoma's probably scored 10 touchdowns on this, where they'll get initially spilled and then kick out the support player. And that thing is so wide. The alley to run through is so wide, it's unbelievable. So a lot of times what you'll get is you won't get the double spill. You'll get the first puller will be spilled and the second puller will be forced. A lot of teams will run that to try and get get the cavalry coming from the backside. So I've just seen some guys get kicked out seriously on that second kick, and that's really helpful for guys. So Coach Rice, you were asking, do you ever put the pitch defender in conflict by sending number 1 to replace him and have a fourth option? Explain that to me a little bit.
Just like basically you're running your counter option. You have 3 options. You're going to give the ball, keep it, or throw the bubble. But then instead of putting number 1 on a stalk, you send him on the pitch man behind him. So basically it's an RPO for a fourth option, I guess is the best way.
Ooh, yeah, man. I think if you had a quarterback that could handle it, you could certainly do some of that stuff. I think the cool thing about some of this, it's kind of the counter option stuff, is because the play takes a little bit longer to develop, it can almost end up feeling like boot. And so if you have a quarterback that can handle it, a lot of times what I've seen in the past is I've seen teams run kind of like and this is more option teams, but they'll run counter option, and then the quarterback will just pull back and throw the vertical. So I've seen people do stuff like that. And I think it would just I think you can have fun with it, to be honest. The nice thing about counter option in particular is that you're able to work the edge. And so a lot of times those plays, since they take a little bit longer to develop, some really cool things can happen. And then did you have another question, Coach?
Yes. Just take it back to the boundary where you're running your glance to control that safety, dropping down the box. Have you ever taken your counter option that you showed last, run that into the boundary, and then add that glance concept to control the safety over there?
I have not personally done that, but I think what I have seen is I haven't necessarily seen the glance. What I have seen is that cruiser will run a vertical. Now, again, I've been watching a lot of triple option teams run it. So I've seen kind of they'll run that twirl motion where that H-back will come in quick motion, or that slot come in quick motion and then arc up to the strong safety. So he's going to the alley player and he'll just bypass him. So instead of blocking him, he'll bypass him and run the vertical. I like the idea of running the glance. I think, I think, to be honest with you, a lot of triple option teams don't necessarily think in those terms. They think more in like, we'll work the arc to a vertical. So I think the pass game philosophy is probably a little different, but that's why I think when you marry some of the spread option principles with some of the RPO game stuff, I think you can do some really cool stuff. And I think it's kind of an unexplored frontier of football that's definitely coming. And I think, I take it back to when Urban Meyer took the job at Utah. He was going places like Navy and different places to steal option principles, even though he wasn't running flex bone. and that was what he brought so many option principles with him. And I think that there needs to be an even bigger revival around bringing that spread option game into just spread option or spread offenses in general. I think they're missing out on some really key plays that can be super helpful for them. Coach, if I have a few minutes here, I would love to share my screen here. And is that coming through for you?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to draw something up real quick because I know that there's some guys out there that are running, just traditional spread offenses and maybe are missing out on this option or in this counter option play that I think can be really helpful. And I know a lot of guys have asked me questions about how to handle the tight front stuff because that's, it's kind of dominating the football landscape right now. And I think everybody's looking for run game answers against the tight front. And so this is something I really like about what spread option football gives you against a look like this that maybe some other offenses maybe don't have these same answers built in. So I'm just going to drop a too high shell here. And again, I want to just think through these counter option principles. So the nice thing about option teams is what they can do with four eyes. So the great thing here is a lot of times coaches will call, whether it's midline option or something different like that, where they'll actually read the four eye. But what I've seen teams do that I really, really like is they will run counter option where they're actually going to log that four eye and he's going to become the edge defender for them. So what they'll do is they'll work down on center and guard on the nose, climb up to backside linebacker. They'll try and work a cutoff on the four eye. And what they'll do is they'll maybe put a hand on the four eye, but really look to climb up to the Mike linebacker. And then that guard is gaining depth, and he's logging this four eye. Okay. So what we've got here is that, a lot of times you'll have the dive fake and the quarterback will just rotate his hips out. And we come in orbit motion over the top as let's fix that. We come in orbit motion over the top as the pitch man. And the great thing here is this cruiser is actually able to bypass the Sam up to the strong safety. And the quarterback, since he's got a log on the four eye and he's got a cutoff of the Mike linebacker, is able to work the edge and get to the Sam linebacker. That's our pitch man. That's who we're pitching off of. So again, you can see whether we, outside release this, we get our cruiser up to the strong safety. So basically the players left to make this play are a hang jack backer from the backside and a free safety running with it. But again, a lot of times you're getting run fake here and maybe he'll get a glance in here to hold that safety. So you're able to you're running counter, right? You're running counter, and instead of and basically the variation is that instead of just trying to wash down the four eye and have this guy handle the edge defender. This is the new edge defender here because a lot of teams are able to run that, right, with that Sam linebacker setting the edge. You're able to log the four eye, work up to the Mike, and then pitch off the Sam because you're bypassing the Sam to the strong safety. So again, this is just something to add to the toolbox that you can consider. A lot of times, what I've seen teams do successfully is they've actually run, let me see if I can pull this up. So they'll run GT counter against a tight front. And again, this is a tough front to run GT counter against, right? Because it's really hard to work a double on a four eye and climb up to a backer. So let's say we got a Will and a Mike here. But one of the things that you can do is you can work down on the nose and maybe even block back to the four eye. If you have a really good center here, blocking back on a four eye is incredible. I've seen some guys that can do it. It's really hard to do, but I've seen some guys that can do it, especially because a lot of times four eyes aren't penetrators. That's one of the things I've realized is a lot of times they're reading. And so a lot of times if they're reading and they get a pull away, they're going to work a little bit more flat. And a lot of times that center is able to get all the way back. So if we get work down and then we actually arc the tackle on the four eye. And again, if he's playing the inside shade of the tackle, he's at least going to have to take a step here. And so if we run counter trap where we kick out the inside half of the four eye and work tight off that wrap, I've seen, I think Georgia used to run this a bunch, where they're actually kicking out the 4-eye. So I think that's something to consider, that when you're, as a coach, you have to consider this. One of the best defenses I've seen against counter, GT in particular, is, this mint front, right? Where he's actually the C gap defender. He's playing through the B gap. And what I've seen is, because we're trying to work a double here and climb all the way backside to this linebacker and maybe soloing on the nose, we're not getting enough movement on this 4-eye. We're not getting enough movement on the 4-eye. And then when we actually do end up pulling to kick out, they're either spilling or they're denting our first puller. And so what ends up happening is it just kind of bleeds all the way to the sideline. And then that strong safety is able to fill in. The Mike's able to work over the top. So there's just problems that you run into, right? There's issues you run into when you're running against this tight front. And I think just having a couple things in your repertoire is helpful. And I've had some guys ask me, what do we do if we get a bear front where they run, the 3s and the 9s? And one of the things that I really like against this front is, again, it all comes back to me for this center, man. If you've got a great center, you can do so much great stuff. So one of the things that I've seen done really well against the bear front is pin down on that nose, pin down on the 3, pull the center to kick out the 9 technique and pull the tackle, and then base block the 3 technique and read out on the 9. So you've got a 5-man front here. And if you can just get solid down blocks by the tackle and by the guard, and your center's active enough that he can pull, and then your tackle can finish up with a solid lead through the C gap that just disappeared on that linebacker. So even if you've got, a pretty solid box, the thing you can't do is get someone to this will linebacker. Okay. Again, you don't have the numbers here, but say you've got your slot receiver coming in jet motion and it just holds him long enough that this play can hit. And what I always tell centers is, when you're pulling, because of the way the scheme works and because of the way the timing works, you don't have to be in a hurry. You're already one space on the offensive line over. So this guy does not have to be in a hurry when he's pulling. And I think that's one of the mistakes that guys make, is they try to get out there too quick. You got time if you're the center pulling. And so especially if you're working to a 9 technique and he wants to keep outside contain and keep that edge, work to him, kick him out, take your time. You're going to get there in time. You don't have to, centers, obviously the worry and concern we have as coaches, if I pull my center, man, he's going to snap that thing all over the place. Tell him to make sure he gets the snap, and then he's got time to get down to the 9 technique. So again, I just wanted to give you a couple snapshots of what I like against some of these fronts that are kind of ubiquitous here in football, because you just got to have some strategies. Just because someone's running a tight front doesn't mean you can't run the football and run counter and run your main schemes. Especially counter option, man. There's so many cool things you can do if you're willing to slip a tackle. I don't think enough offenses are handling the 4-eye by not blocking him. And again, obviously you're blocking him here on the
Hey, Coach Casey.
Yes, sir.
I don't mean to cut you off. I got to
No,
go ahead
great.
and wrap this room up for you.
Absolutely.
But
sure.
Thank you again for coming out and giving back to the association. And thank you again for the great talk. And have a good rest of your night.
Thanks,
I appreciate
Dan.
you guys. Thanks so much for having me.